The ancient human longing to connect with the rest of nature calls us to heal both ourselves and our tragically damaged relationship with the rest of nature. One name for this healing practice is ecotherapy. First of all, I'd like to let you know where you are. As you can probably tell from all the sounds around us, we're in the middle of a small city, but we're also in the middle of a forest. My husband and I have a backyard food forest. We took the permaculture design course a few years ago, and it really inspired us to try and see what we could do right here in our yard. And what's really amazed us is not only that we're able now to grow a fair amount of our food, but also that there is a kind of therapy that happens from being in this kind of environment. And as a therapist, I've been a therapist for over 40 years, I began to realize that the forest was actually beginning to change me. That when I was out here, I could really feel my mood lighten, I could feel anxiety go down. If I was depressed at all, I would find that disappearing. And that's when I started to really study ecotherapy and to find out why is it that connecting us to the rest of nature is so profoundly healing. Ecopsychology is the study of the relationship between humans and the rest of nature. Or as some people put it, it's the relationship between the human psyche and the rest of nature. And what's important about this is the phrase "the rest of," because it's really critical that we understand that we too are part of nature, that somehow it's not true, as we've been thinking in this culture, that humans are separate from and even superior to the rest of nature. So that's the first part, is ecopsychology. And then ecotherapy, which some people call applied ecopsychology or clinical ecopsychology, is actually various things that we do to heal the relationship between human beings and the rest of nature, or the human psyche and the rest of nature. And this is obviously a pretty big endeavor, because right now the relationship between humans and the rest of nature is so highly dysfunctional that we're actually headed towards the destruction of not only our own life support systems, but the life support systems of the rest of the planet. So obviously we really need to look deeply into this. There are multiple ecotherapies. So there's many methods of helping people regain that understanding and that experience of being connected to the rest of nature. Sometimes people use animal-assisted therapies, horticultural therapy where people are doing gardening. There's even something called agrotherapy, farm therapy, where people get back in touch with the rest of nature through participating in farming. In fact, a colleague of mine uses that to help heal PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder, with veterans of various wars, and he himself is a vet, so he really understands it. One thing we're learning is that there's some kind of magic that happens when a wounded person is in touch with a part of nature that's been wounded, whether it's animals or whether it's land. And there's a circle of healing that happens, where not only are we getting healed by that reconnection, but we're also participating in the healing of the rest of nature. And that distinction is really important in understanding the difference between what I call level 1 ecotherapies and level 2 ecotherapies. Level 1 is really nature-assisted therapies, where basically we are connecting with a part of nature, or even the rest of nature, as a way of healing ourselves. So the focus is really on us, on using the rest of nature. And as you can probably hear, that's a dangerous word, because as humans we've been looking at nature as just something to use for way too long. So level 2 ecotherapies are a little more reciprocal. It's more the understanding that we can't really heal ourselves even if we're also trying to reconnect with a nature that's so profoundly wounded, and we're not doing anything to help the rest of nature. So that second level has to do with a little deeper understanding of the the circle of healing, or the reciprocal nature of our relationship with the rest of nature. One thing to keep in mind about nature therapies is that this isn't a one-size-fits-all kind of a deal. That one of the things we need to do as ecotherapists is help each person figure out what is a method of nature connection or nature reconnection that feels good to them or is appropriate for them. I have a friend who's also a therapist, and we were talking about ecotherapy, and she basically said to me, "Oh, ecotherapy, that's not for me. I'm really a city kind of gal. I'm just not, I don't think this is right for me." And then I asked her about her cats, because I knew she has these 2 cats that she adores. And she immediately softened and said, "Oh, my babies, I really love them. They heal me." And I thought, well, that's ecotherapy, isn't it? It's just that she had to find that method of nature connection. And for her, it turned out to be animal-assisted therapy. And that's true, I think, of all of our clients. Not everybody wants to come and sit outdoors with a therapist. Not everybody wants to go on a vision quest in the wilderness. Not everybody wants to do gardening. I mean, there are many, many methods of connecting with the rest of nature. One thing it's good to remember as well is that nature isn't just something out there. That because we're connected to the whole of nature, there's also wild nature in here, and reconnecting with that is another form of ecotherapy. So there are wild parts of our body that are not controlled by our conscious mind and our willpower. There are dreams that happen when we go to sleep. There's all kinds of things in wild psyche or the wild soma, the wild body, that can help us. If we reconnect with them, that becomes an ecotherapy itself. So for many people, somatic therapies or body therapies are very healing. Some people like to do yoga. Other people find that outdoor exercise is very healing. In fact, in England, at the University of Essex, they've done a series of really important studies that have revealed that connection with nature outdoors, whether it's in this case it was walks in green nature, were as effective an antidepressant for mild to moderate depression as medication. And that is really beginning to make people rethink a lot of what we've been doing in psychotherapy for many years. Because there's actually a book out that I'd like to recommend. It's called Your Brain on Nature, that's compiled by a medical doctor and a naturopath, where they've put together all the research that shows pretty impressively that connection with nature in many different methods is profoundly healing, and that the research really can prove that. So this becomes an evidence-based therapy. And I think that's beginning to impress a lot of people in the medical community and also in the psychotherapy community. Eco-philosopher Joanna Macy actually has some wonderful advice that I like to share with my clients for a constructive way of dealing with facing the bad news about what's really going on the planet. She makes a suggestion that we choose one thing from each of 3 columns. And the first column is basically activities we can take to limit the bad things that are going on. So we might choose one thing where we join one organization, or we do one act of resistance against something negative that's going on. In other words, we're not trying to save the whole planet all by ourselves. We're just picking one thing where we can kind of take a stand. The second column has to do with building the world we'd really like to live in. Sort of building the sustainable world, building the solutions. And in that case, perhaps someone might want to do what my husband and I have done and start growing some of our own food, or building a food forest, helping other people in our community with community gardening, things like that. So there's many things that we can do to build that world. And that would be the second thing. Again, we can't do it all. No one person can do it all. No one group can do it all. But we can do something from each column. And the third column is raising our level of consciousness. And again, this is not one size fits all either. There's going to be many different methods that people have and prefer for how they're going to go about doing that. For some of us, it's about scientific understanding, getting a better understanding of ecology and ecosystems and what's really going on the planet. Another way to do it might be to find a spiritual practice that works for us. In Joanna Macy's case, she is a Buddhist, and she finds that to be very centering and healing for her and getting a broader perspective on what's going on. Somebody else might do meditation, or they might do yoga, or they might really immerse themselves in nature connection, because a lot of us find that being in nature is a profoundly spiritual experience, and it gives us the courage and the strength then to go forward. The important thing, I think, in what Joanna Macy has recommended and why it's so wise is that we don't want to get stuck in any one of these columns. If we look at the columns, we realize why. If you only get stuck in column 1, where you're just sort of resisting the bad, you really risk the possibility of completely burning out. If you just get stuck in building the world you want to live in, that sounds really good and it feels really good, but you're also doing nothing to stop the bad things that are sooner or later going to impinge on your little sustainable cocoon that you've built. So you also need to be doing that. And the third column, you don't want to get stuck in just doing consciousness work either, because again, you can be feeling really wonderful after your yoga session or your meditation session, but if the rest of the world is falling apart, it's not possible to truly escape, and frankly, you're not doing what you need to be doing to contribute to the solution. So that's just a guideline that we can give our clients as ecotherapists, is we can really help people find a balance between those three things. And that is a great relief, I find, both for myself and also in terms of clients. It's enough just to do those three things and not allow ourselves to get overwhelmed into either total inaction or total despair.
Thankfully, the ecotherapeutic process of reconnecting with the rest of nature is profoundly joyful and soul-satisfying. As we rediscover ourselves as an integral part of this beautiful and mysterious cosmos, we find the ecological niche where our deepest well-being, most creative gifts, and the world's greatest needs meet.